Todd Winkler was the charming husband with a flawless smile, and Celina Marquette was the elegant wife who once believed she had married the perfect man, until her burned body was found in a car crash that was no accident. Behind their polished, suburban life hid a terrifying secret. Todd wasn't just living a double life. He was becoming someone else entirely. Todd Winkler was the kind of man people noticed instantly, not because he was loud or flashy, but because everything about him felt put together. Tall, with carefully combed hair, polished shoes, and the quiet confidence of someone who had never known failure, he exuded calm. In the quiet, upper-class neighborhood of Silver Pines, Todd stood out as a man of distinction. He had once been a top Air Force trauma surgeon, a role that earned him medals, commendations, and access to high-level military medical research. After his honorable discharge, he moved into private consulting, working with biotech firms and pharmaceutical companies. The neighbors only knew he traveled for work and seemed very intelligent. No one ever questioned what exactly he did or why he was often gone for days without warning. Todd's wife, Celina Marquette, was equally striking in her own right. Once a rising star in fashion merchandising, she had stepped away from her career shortly after marrying Todd. Together, they had 2 young children, and Celina's days were filled with school pickups, packed lunches, and story time. Friends would sometimes comment on how different she seemed since the wedding. Once bubbly and outgoing, she now appeared tired and cautious, her laughter often cut short, her phone always on silent. She brushed it off as the exhaustion of motherhood. Todd was seen as the ideal family man. He went to PTA meetings, attended school plays, and occasionally volunteered for community blood drives. He was articulate and polite, with just enough self-deprecation to make people like him. But something in his smile felt distant. It was like he was performing a role, as if loving husband and devoted father were characters he'd rehearsed. Celina's family, especially her younger sister Noelle, began to express concern. Celina rarely returned their calls, and when she did, her answers were clipped and vague. She never visited without Todd, and she never talked about their relationship. It was as if a curtain had been drawn around her new life. One evening, Aveline Dorn, Celina's closest friend since college, came over for dinner. She later described the visit as strangely quiet, despite the children playing in the next room. Celina barely spoke, and Todd answered almost all questions on her behalf. Aveline remembered Celina fiddling nervously with her bracelet the whole night and how Todd's eyes never left her. Something was off. The next morning, Aveline received a short text from Celina that simply said, "I'm fine, just tired." But the message didn't feel like her. It was short, cold, and distant. Despite all the outward appearances of a happy household, something sinister brewed just under the surface. Todd had grown more controlling in recent months, dictating what Celina could wear, criticizing her parenting, even limiting her contact with her friends. At first, Celina tried to rationalize it. She thought maybe he was stressed from work, maybe he just needed time. But the excuses began to wear thin. He started tracking her phone, installing family safety apps without her consent, and checking her browsing history. When she protested, he accused her of being paranoid or ungrateful. Celina began keeping a handwritten journal. In it, she documented her thoughts, fears, and suspicions. At first, the entries were hesitant, unsure. But over time, her writing grew sharper, more frantic. She wrote about waking up to find Todd standing silently beside the bed, watching her sleep. She wrote about doors she'd locked at night being found open in the morning. And she wrote about the night she saw him in the backyard, digging a hole near the fence line when she confronted him. He said he was planting a new tree. None of this was visible to the outside world. To everyone else, the Winklers were still the charming family with a smart dad, a lovely mother, and 2 perfect kids. But for Celina, every day was becoming more unpredictable, more frightening. And though she didn't know it yet, her carefully hidden fears would soon become the centerpiece of a criminal investigation that would shock the entire town. Celina's journal entries became more urgent, more disturbed. She no longer just wrote about the emotional distance between them. She began to document events she believed were dangerous. One entry described waking up groggy and disoriented, with no memory of how she fell asleep. Another talked about a meal Todd prepared that tasted strange, after which she was sick for 2 days. She never told anyone directly, but her writings painted a picture of escalating paranoia, or perhaps a quiet cry for help that no one had yet seen. Todd had grown colder, his affection mechanical, and his moods unpredictable. He would be calm one moment, obsessive the next. If she came home late from errands, he demanded to know where she had been. If she forgot to respond to a text, he'd show up at her location, claiming he was just checking in. The control tightened, but it was always wrapped in a rational tone, which made it hard for Celina to explain to anyone why she was afraid. He never hit her, never screamed. Instead, he watched, waited, and manipulated. His silence was more terrifying than violence. At the same time, Todd's professional life was unraveling in ways he kept hidden. He had lied on several consulting contracts, inflating credentials, and providing falsified data to secure lucrative deals. When one firm conducted an internal audit, they discovered discrepancies tied to a mysterious subcontractor named Dr. Marcus Veer. The name didn't exist in any registry, and investigators soon found that it was an alias Todd had been using to reroute client funds into offshore accounts. Todd knew the walls were closing in. Celina was asking more questions. One night, she confronted him about the money she noticed missing from their joint account. He deflected, then went silent for 2 days. She wrote in her journal, "He disappears when I challenge him. I think he's planning something." Celina started reaching out in small, cautious ways. She asked Avellini to keep a copy of a document she claimed was for a future job application, but it included a scanned image of her journal's first few pages. She emailed her sister Noelle an old vacation photo, captioned only, "I want this back." These gestures made no sense to others at the time, but later they would be read as hidden signals. Then, an odd incident shook the household. The children's nanny, a college student named Reina Valdez, arrived one morning to find Todd in the kitchen, barefoot, staring at the stove. The burner was on, but no pot sat on it. The room was hot, and Todd didn't acknowledge her at first. When he finally did, he said he had been thinking through a formula. Reina brushed it off as eccentricity, but later told her roommate that the whole thing felt off, like he wasn't really there. That same week, Todd began purchasing strange supplies: industrial-grade bleach, nitro gloves, extra locks, even a new carpet cleaner. When questioned by the store clerk, he casually mentioned he was remodeling his garage. Celina never saw any remodeling. In fact, the garage was now locked with a new keypad she didn't have access to. Celina's entries became increasingly desperate. Her handwriting grew frantic, margins filled with scribbled phrases like, "He's hiding something, and I need to run." She attempted to leave twice, but returned each time once after Todd showed up at a motel where she had taken the kids, claiming he just wanted to talk. The second time, she drove to her sister's home in San Diego, but turned back after Todd sent a message saying the kids were asking for her, attaching a photo of them looking tired and sad. It worked. She returned. It was clear now. Celina was trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like a prison inside. What she didn't know was that Todd, too, was running out of room to maneuver. His financial fraud was close to being exposed. His wife was beginning to resist, and the version of himself he had long tried to hide was beginning to surface, calculated, cold, and ready to eliminate whatever threatened his perfect world. On a foggy morning in late February, A 911 call came in reporting a vehicle on fire near the wooded edge of Briar Ridge, just outside Silver Pines. The car, a black sedan registered to Celina Winkler, had veered off the road and collided with a tree before erupting into flames. Firefighters were on the scene within minutes, but the car was already engulfed. Inside, they found a single occupant burned beyond recognition. Initial assumptions pointed to a tragic accident, possibly caused by slippery roads or driver fatigue. But things didn't add up. When authorities notified Todd Winkler, his reaction was subdued, almost clinical. He claimed Celina had left the house early that morning after an argument. He suggested she might have been emotional, distracted. He even hinted at the possibility of depression. To those around him, his calm demeanor felt unnatural. There were no tears, no visible signs of grief. Just quiet, controlled words and long silences. Detective Vaughn Mersel, who took lead on the case, had investigated plenty of car accidents, but something about this scene bothered him. The fire had burned. Too fast for the conditions. The car's gas tank was ruptured, but the flames had an unusual pattern, indicating an accelerant. Moreover, the brake lines showed no signs of wear or failure. Forensics found traces of gasoline around the exterior of the vehicle, far more than what would be expected in a simple collision. It looked staged when the autopsy was performed. It revealed something even more disturbing. The victim, confirmed through dental records to be Celina, had been sedated with a high dose of a rare barbiturate before the crash. The dosage was strong enough to impair consciousness, possibly rendering her unconscious. She may have been alive when the car burned, but unable to move or escape. It was no accident. It was murder. The investigation turned immediately toward Todd. Detectives learned he had purchased the same barbiturate from a chemical supplier 3 weeks earlier using a business account linked to his consulting work. On surveillance footage, he was seen at a gas station early that morning, filling a red container with gasoline. When confronted, Todd said it was for a backup generator, but a search of the property showed no generator, and the container was missing. Celina's friends and family were devastated, but not shocked. Aveline came forward with the copied journal, entries Celina had secretly given her. In them, Celina described fearing Todd would kill her and make it look like an accident. She had even predicted he would use fire. Those pages became central evidence. Investigators searched Todd's home thoroughly. Behind a false panel in the garage, they found a stack of shredded documents, many of which were pieced back together by forensic specialists. These included financial records tied to the alias Dr. Marcus Veer, along with forged identity cards, burner phone receipts, and a partial map marking remote locations near Briar Ridge. It was a detailed plan, months in the making. One chilling detail emerged from a security camera at a self-storage unit Todd had rented under a false name. Footage showed him visiting the unit 2 days before the fire, carrying a heavy duffel bag and exiting empty-handed. Inside, police found clothing that matched what Celina had worn the day she died, clean, folded, and dry. It suggested she had changed or been changed before the crash. Todd maintained his innocence throughout questioning, stating that Celina had been under mental strain and suggesting she may have drugged herself. But with mounting forensic evidence, the timeline began to betray him. He was the only one with motive, means, and access. His financial crimes were days from being uncovered. His wife was preparing to leave, and his carefully controlled world was collapsing. The investigation became a media frenzy. Headlines dubbed it the Winkler Inferno, and neighbors who once saw Todd as brilliant and charming now questioned everything. Underneath the calm surface had been a man spinning a web of lies, hiding 2 faces, one for the world and one in the shadows. The fire had exposed them both. The investigation into Todd Winkler's life went deeper than anyone expected. Once his financial crimes were made public, a cascade of revelations followed. Federal agents launched a separate inquiry into the consulting contracts Todd had secured over the years. Several biotech firms reported that data Todd had submitted was either stolen or entirely fabricated. His prestigious image began to crumble. The man who had built a reputation as a brilliant mind in military medicine and private sector strategy was now being seen as a dangerous fraud, but beyond the financial deception. What truly unsettled investigators were the psychological evaluations and medical records, hidden deep in classified Air Force archives. Through legal channels, Detective Von Mersel obtained access to a long-buried psychiatric file. The report dated back nearly a decade, during Todd's final years in military service, and it painted a chilling picture. According to the report, Todd had undergone a period of psychiatric observation after a violent outburst during a field mission overseas. At the time, he was believed to be suffering from combat-related stress. But what emerged from multiple evaluations was something far more complex. Todd displayed symptoms of a dissociative disorder. He spoke about a separate version of himself when he referred to in third person. The alias Marcus wasn't new. He had been using it years before his financial schemes ever began. The doctors concluded that Todd may have been struggling with a form of identity compartmentalization, potentially dangerous if left untreated. Instead of full intervention, he was quietly discharged, likely to protect the Air Force from scandal. Back in Silver Pines, evidence kept mounting. Forensic analysts found Todd's fingerprints on a syringe cap in the garage, matching the type of needle used to administer the barbiturates found in Celina's system. Additionally, remnants of a burner phone were uncovered in the ashes of the backyard fire pit. The SIM card was partially melted, but data recovery revealed calls made to unknown numbers around the time of Celina's death. Authorities suspected he had been communicating with someone involved in the logistics of his escape, planned perhaps a contact tied to his offshore accounts. Meanwhile, Celina's journal entries took on a new level of importance. In one entry, dated just 4 days before her death, she wrote about finding strange emails on Todd's laptop messages from someone addressed only as M. The emails referenced final steps, clearing tracks, and cutting ties. Experts confirmed the emails were between Todd's primary and alternate email accounts. He had been writing to himself as two different people, meticulously planning the crime as if it were a business operation. The most disturbing discovery, however, came when investigators searched an encrypted drive recovered from Todd's home office. On it was a folder named Contingency. Inside were blueprints for changing identities, including fake passports, bank withdrawals, and a document titled Exit Day. The plan was timed with Celina's murder. Todd had planned not just to kill her, but to vanish. Detective Mersel brought in psychiatric experts to review all the findings. One specialist concluded that Todd had become so deeply immersed in his constructed personas that he had lost the ability to separate truth from fiction. He wasn't just hiding behind an alias, he had become it. In taped interviews, Todd began referring to Marcus in the third person again, saying things like, "He did it, and I tried to stop him." But when asked who he was, he'd smile and reply, "I'm both." This led to a split opinion on Todd's mental state. Was he a criminal mastermind using mental illness as a shield, or a man truly fractured by years of deception and inner turmoil? The prosecution leaned heavily on his calculated behavior, the evidence destruction, the alibi rehearsals, and the financial motivation. The defense, however, painted him as a fragmented soul who lost control of the darker half within. As trial preparations began, public fascination intensified. The story had everything: murder, money, mental instability, and a man with two faces. But behind all the headlines was a haunting truth. Celina Winkler had seen the danger long before anyone else, and despite her efforts to escape, she had become the final piece in a twisted plan. One that Todd had rehearsed, refined, and executed with chilling precision. The courtroom was packed on the day Todd Winkler's trial began. Journalists, legal analysts, and members of the community filled the seats, all waiting to witness the unraveling of one of Silver Pine's most shocking murder cases. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. They detailed Todd's secret double life, the mounting financial fraud, the forged identity of Dr. Marcus Veer, and most damning of all, the meticulous planning behind Celina's murder. Photos of the burned vehicle, the reconstructed journal entries, and the syringe evidence were all presented in brutal clarity. The prosecutors emphasized how every step Todd took from drugging Celina to staging the crash was calculated and deliberate. His efforts to cover his tracks weren't signs of mental illness, they argued, but proof of cold, rational thought. The defense offered a radically different picture. They brought in mental health experts who testified that Todd exhibited signs of dissociative identity disorder, and that his actions were influenced by a fractured psyche he had been struggling with for years. They leaned heavily on the military, psychiatric files, highlighting the early signs of mental instability that had gone untreated. To the jury, the defense painted Todd as a man consumed by a shadow self, a darker identity, that had slowly taken over. Todd himself was calm during the proceedings. He often sat still, occasionally tilting his head to the side, as if listening to someone. When he took the stand, his testimony was eerie. He spoke about Marcus in the past tense, describing him as a part of himself that had grown stronger. Over time, at one point he even said, "I was trying to stop him, but he wanted her gone." His eyes remained dry, his voice steady. There was no remorse, just detachment. Celina's family sat in the front row, stone-faced throughout. Her sister Noelle clutched a small locket that had belonged to Celina. Aveline Dorn, her best friend, testified about the subtle signs Celina had shared. The night she handed over her journal pages, the text messages that felt like coded warnings. Each account brought new weight to the growing mountain of evidence. One piece of evidence that shook the courtroom came in the form of a video recovered from Todd's encrypted hard drive. In it, Todd stood in front of a mirror, practicing a version of his police interview. He tested different emotions, different answers. At one point, he smiled and whispered, "You'll believe anything if I say it right." The video was time-stamped just days before Celina's death. It destroyed any lingering belief that he may have been unaware of his actions. The jury deliberated for 6 days. They reviewed the psychiatric files, the forensic timelines, and the hidden folders. In the end, their verdict was unanimous: guilty of first-degree murder. Todd Winkler was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in a rare moment of candor, called the murder a betrayal of trust so complete, it defied understanding. Todd was transferred to a high-security psychiatric facility, not because the court believed he was insane, but because of the unique threat he posed: intelligent, manipulative, and capable of masking himself behind layers of deception. Reports from inside the facility say he rarely speaks, but sometimes paces his cell in the middle of the night, muttering names, often his own, sometimes Marcus. The town of Silver Pines was left scarred. What they thought was a perfect family turned out to be a carefully constructed illusion. Todd had worn two faces for years, one of the loving husband and brilliant consultant, the other of a predator waiting to strike. In the end, it was Celina's quiet warnings, her hidden journal entries, and the pieces of a plan she tried so hard to expose that brought him down. The trial closed. The cameras moved on, and the story faded from headlines. But for those who knew Celina, her memory didn't fade. She had seen the truth long before the rest of the world caught up. And though she couldn't escape it, she left behind a trail that led to justice, proof that even the darkest secrets can't stay buried forever.